I welcome all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat as we typically do, and share your affiliation and who you're here representing today. We can do that as we go through the meeting. También quiero dedicar poquito tiempo para recordarles a nuestros participantes de habla hispana que hay servicios de traducción disponibles. En el menú que se encuentra abajo de la pantalla está la opción para seleccionar la traducción, y si gustan hacer comentarios en el chat, también pueden elevar sus comentarios usando la función del chat. And so for our non-English speakers, feel free to use the chat to surface questions and comments. And then quick reminder that the translation function is at the bottom menu of the Zoom for you to select the language of your choice. At this moment, I'd like to invite members of the public, those of you who are here today that are not formal members of the HRTC, to come off mute or raise your hand and make some brief comments for consideration of everyone that's here today. So let me see if we have anybody interested in coming off mute or raising their hands to offer some quick commentary. We've probably got time for a couple, so let's stop now and acknowledge the floor.
Yeah, I'm looking at, we'll give it 15 seconds in case someone wants to.
Again, this is for those of you who are not members of the HRTC.
We have one right now. So Melissa or John?
Yeah.
Hi, this is John. I'll speak for Melissa. We had a meeting yesterday and we just want to make sure we can incorporate climate and environment and environmental justice into all the work groups and see how we can help any of the work groups as they envision going forward with a project or some grant funding, how we can make sure that we're looking at the new reduced fossil fuel environment or closer to net zero environment, and where environment can be accomplished.
Great, thank you, John. Others, any other comments from the group, non-HRTC members? Not seeing any on mine. Jesse, anything on your end?
No, I don't see anything else. I think we can move on to the next item.
That sounds good. So here's the portion of the agenda where those of you who are on the HRTC can come off mute, raise your hand, and offer comments or updates, work related to this initiative in your county, for others to consider. And I do want to mention that before we open the floor for comments, we do have a colleague from the Governor's Office for Business and Economic Development. Many of you have met Christy. She is supporting this effort in Orange County and is the general liaison between this work and her colleagues at the state. Christy's doing a round of outreach to try to connect and meet as many of you as possible. And if you've received any correspondence from her, we encourage you to take her up on our offer to connect for a few minutes and understand how she may be able to support what we're doing here. And so she's a resource to you. But with that in mind, let me open it up for any of you who want to come off mute and offer comments or updates to your peers. I see a hand from Gary. Gary, go ahead.
Yes. Last week we had a poll to add or separate health, the strategies of health and environmental justice. And I just wanted to thank all of you who supported that separation. I really do. Health is a huge issue. Environment is a huge issue, as all of you think your strategies are huge issues. And so without marginalizing either one of them, I think separation was the best thing. And I just want to thank you for supporting.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Others wishing to make comments or provide any updates to the group here? Si gustan hacer unos comentarios, ustedes que son miembros del la mesa de gobernancia de esta iniciativa, si gustan prender el micrófono, levantar la manita virtual, les damos unos momentos para hacer comentarios o ofrecer información que sea relevante para el grupo aquí. Any comments or questions? Jesse, anything on your end?
I think we can move on.
Okay, very good. And we'll have ample time to jump into discussion on specific content here in a bit. So as we're moving on to the bulk and the meat and potatoes of our agenda, we're actually 4 minutes ahead, believe it or not. We're going to be spending the rest of this meeting really doing a deep dive into the strategies document. And so my colleague Annalisa is actually going to drop in the chat now the spreadsheets that contain about 105 strategies or so that are both in English and Spanish. The goal over the next couple of weeks is to reduce that focus from that 105 number down to up to 21. And we certainly don't have to land on that number, but that's the most that we'll be able to land on based on the poll results from last week. But we're going to dedicate at least 10 minutes to each of the 7 categories today. And so we certainly encourage questions and comments. If you can keep them brief and non-repetitive, I think it'll give an opportunity for more people to express their concerns, their questions, their clarifying questions, their statements related to any particular strategy found in those categories. And so just want to give the group that encouragement, brief, non-repetitive, and concise, so we can get through as many of these as possible. But before we jump into that, I also want to give Jesse an opportunity to cover some quick bullet points on some reminders on how we arrived here. And then I'll offer a couple of comments, and then we'll jump into discussion. So Jesse, let me turn it over to you.
Catherine, can you share screen? Thank you. Can you go to presentation view? So I think just before we start, right, like I think it helps to reiterate kind of how we got here. I think everyone who kind of began on this journey, right, a lot of time was committed to the research document. So that's kind of item 1. We then did outreach and engagement to the community. Those findings were presented to you in 2 meetings in October and 1 in January. Those files are in that folder as we think about, again, not presuming what the community needs, but actually hearing from them directly. And the questions were tried to tie as best they could to the decisions that you're making today. Then how did we get to that list of 105 that was mentioned? And it's been a while, I understand that, but this process was presented to the group and approved by the group, that we had the stakeholder groups, which is your colleagues beyond just this group, as representative and diverse as this group is, and as large as it is, it's not fully representative of Orange County. And so we use the stakeholder groups to broaden it even further, to decentralize this process even further, and trying to understand, what strategies, given the state's buckets, would they like to see. Then those groups decided to vote up from their brainstorming session 2 per category. And so that's kind of what you have. Those long lists per category came from every stakeholder group, giving us their top 2. So that's what you got there. Then the top strategies for each stakeholder group, again, were included in the Excel sheet, and you have that. You've had it for a while. Of course, given the conversation yesterday, and it was alluded already by Gary, right, there was a recommendation to split environment from health equity, to make that its own category and be able to select those own strategies. That was approved, as well as options of, should we pick 2 per category, should we pick 3 or 4? The winner there was 3 per category. So I'll show you the poll later on when there's more time, but we wanted to make sure that is kind of what was established here. It was also, of course, that we will show these results and work on refining the language. A lot of things were brought up that some sound duplicative. That's very true. But again, given that these were 8 different conversations being had, it wasn't, for OCBC or anyone to manipulate those responses. It was those were the tops that came from these stakeholder groups. So, we'll have to look at this, see if trends are coming up. It's not as if when we vote today, it is finalized, but we will refine that language until we get to a point that this group is comfortable with. I hope that we, depending on the results, can spend portions of the next 2 meetings getting that language just right. And so I think the March 22nd is aspirational. I hope we can get to that deadline, because once we have the strategies, now is our time to communicate to the community, hey, like we don't know when we're going to get the state's guidelines specifically, but here's the framework in which we're looking at this. The more time we can give the community to develop their projects and submit them, the better. So the faster we can develop these things, not rushing it, because the quality is important, the better. So hence why, it wouldn't be, I think, wise for us to wait until July or June or July to finish this work. The sooner we can come to some agreement here, the faster we can communicate it and give people a lot of time to develop the projects that we will consider for funding. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions about process. It was offered via emails because we hope to have this poll open for a whole week. If people want to discuss next week prior to voting, I'm happy to do that. But I really want to emphasize committing this time to all of you to make your comments and your opinions be heard about what you think are very legitimate strategies and the best strategies for the region. So with that, can we go to the next slide, and Ish, please take it over.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, for that recap. Entonces, si tienen preguntas del proceso, de cómo hemos llegado aquí a este momento, de la selección de las estrategias, hablen con Jesse fuera de esta reunión y él puede dedicar tiempo, pero la conversación de hoy va a estar enfocada en el contenido de las estrategias para tratar de llegar a un entendimiento de lo que contiene el documento Excel para que informe la próxima semana de votación. Entonces, with that, let's jump right in. And so I'm going to do my best to moderate time so that we give a minimum of 10 minutes to each of these 7 categories. And hopefully you have your spreadsheets in front of you, whether it be in Espanol or in Spanish or any other language. But now is going to be the moment for you all to come off mute, raise your hand, offer comments, ask clarifying questions, so on and so forth, related to these categories. And we're going to start with the category of growing targeted industries. So I'm going to do a time here. We're at 8:43. We'll run through no more than let's call it 8:44. Let's open the floor for comments or questions around this, the strategies found under this category. We have a first question from Dennis.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about, I think there's a great focus within here about apprenticeship and about training to help prepare, especially around disinvested communities. And I noticed that that there are several of them, and a couple are quite specific about programs within the Department of Education and so forth about particular industries. And there are some that are just very broad, just apprenticeship is good and we want to get them in high schools and so forth. So I wonder about as we get down to 3, if Anish yesterday helped to clarify really acutely, I think, and appropriately, that we're going to be moving into a phase where we're competitive with other regions in California for funding. And so is it better to be more broad with, apprenticeship? We want apprenticeships. We want to support apprenticeships, or is it better to highlight specific programs and to be more specific?
My other comment is, I think that's a philosophical question for this group to answer, and not for us. I mean, we will definitely submit things to the state. If the state say, we want something different, then we will have to come back and make those changes. But that's not really a question for staff to answer. That is philosophically for this collaborative to make decisions on whether they want more specificity in the strategies or less.
So to follow up on that, then I am kind of posing it to those who have more experience than I do with the funding process and how that works, and whether the others have thoughts on that.
Jesse,
Yeah, Jill, go ahead, and if you want to add just a comment into that question for Dennis, go right ahead, and then we'll move to Linda after that.
Hi, Dennis. I'm Jill Katavis from Orange County Department of Ed, and I am the leader of our registered apprenticeship program that we have here. And so we are a registered apprenticeship program. We basically can register any non-traditional sector or job. We're focused on youth ages 16 to 24. We currently have funding for 5 specific sectors, but we have applied to expand that. And so we can certainly register anybody. It's just a matter of getting additional funding for other sectors. But in response to the question, we can register any job, any apprenticeship in these non-traditional sectors. That helps.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And let's go to Linda. welcome. I believe there you go.
Good morning. The question that was just asked is one that Jesse, I think we need to consider really carefully, because if we're in competition and we're going to present a really compelling bid, then I think it's in our best interest to be very specific about how we're going to achieve the outcomes that we're proposing. So from that perspective, I just wanted to say that. But my question or comment has to do with, in going through these carefully, it's very clear that there is a little redundancy within each of the categories. There appears to be some redundancy. So the good news is, for example, better understand the disruption of AI and make sure AI across industries is an important part of planning. I mean, I think that there are larger projects here into which some of these other items that are in the same category can be incorporated and or should be incorporated in our final document. So I think there's an opportunity to wrap some of these questions into a big project. So I don't think not too much should be left out in the final analysis, was how I viewed the opportunity.
Thank you, Linda, for your feedback and input there. Let's move to Melanie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Based on the conversation that we had yesterday in our environment and environmental justice group, Ish, can you confirm that we're trying to avoid the siloed approach that has historically been prevalent in grant opportunities, and that it might be more advantageous to be inclusive and collaborative?
Yeah, I will confirm that that's the spirit of this work, is to break down silos across industries, across geographies, across communities, and have that's one of the principles of this work, is for it to be collaborative in nature and have some cohesiveness to it. And as you are preparing your plan for second phase of SURF, which is the implementation phase, what I shared with the group yesterday is that projects that have multiple bottom lines attributed to them will likely raise an appeal for funding, at least from the state, if there's cohesion across different sectors and attention to disinvested communities. And so, Jesse, I certainly welcome you to clarify or add your 2 cents there, but cohesiveness and collaboration are certainly foundational principles in the work.
Nope, you said it perfectly.
Perfect. Then my follow-up comment to that is simply that the environment and environmental justice subsection of this is willing and able to participate in all of the categories, and we would encourage collaboration on that front. We did, as heard earlier during the public comments, talk about participating in other subcommittees, so we're happy to do that, and we're gonna pull together our potential alignments within the other categories. So if folks want to submit applications that incorporate those components on the environment or environmental justice side, we are more than happy to collaborate. And because there's a benefit to that bottom line and makes us more competitive, I think we should think about that strategically, because no money to Orange County is not great, but money to Orange County is better. And if we think about this as a united front, with a piece of the pie coming to a variety of sectors, I think that would be advantageous and strategic. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Melanie. And I'm gonna give Annette the final opportunity here to maybe ask the question into this category, and then Andrew and Krista, if you want to start us off with the next category, we can certainly do that. But go ahead, Annette.
Just on the question regarding apprenticeships and then being specific, just under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, the funding that is received by the Workforce Development Boards supports demand industries, and currently in our regional plan, our demand industries that we talk about are ICT, digital media, healthcare, hospitality, retail hospitality, and tourism and manufacturing. We will be going out for a rewrite of this plan, so that could change, but mainly if we're looking to leverage WIOA funding, that is the demand industries that we target. As far as, you know, the apprenticeship specifically in high schools, I would broaden that to just apprenticeships as a whole, not necessarily just in high schools. And I think that that's something that, you know, we can build upon the work that's happening with OCDE, but as well as the workforce development boards and some of our other community college partners that are also working in apprenticeships too, for those I can't even think of the word, but non-traditional apprenticeships. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. And then I saw, I think it was Andrew had his hand up. We can get your comment in, Andrew, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I was just going to comment real quickly on the apprenticeship program, speaking from an industry that already has kind of well defined and well established apprenticeship programs. Ours are completely self-funded by when our members go to work. It's funded by them, so we wouldn't need any additional funding to make those apprenticeship programs go. So if you can find a way to fit in building trades apprenticeship programs into your strategy, that's money savings right there. Not to mention, many of our affiliates have experience in expanding their apprenticeship programs to bring in new industries. For instance, I know the sheet metal workers have found a way to start a pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship program just for electric bus manufacturing. So these are strategies we can take advantage of. They're pretty nimble and they got, history in it. So if you're looking for apprenticeship help, we got that for you. So
Great, thank you, Andrew. And then let's go to Krista, and well, Austin, I'll squeeze you in, and then we'll cut it off at Austin, and then move to the next strategy category. Krista, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to reiterate was I agree with an earlier point about keeping the strategies broad, so not naming specific, specific programs that, if we can keep them broad, it gives more flexibility. And I think it's really critical to weave into each of the strategies pre-training and soft skills training, because I think evidence shows that without that, people may continue to struggle to access some of these career opportunities. So I think we can just flatten some of these categories out by weaving that one thing in rather than calling it out as separate.
Thank you, Kristen. And oh, go ahead, Jesse.
That must be feedback. I didn't know comments.
Got it. Austin, you have the final word on this category. Welcome.
Just wanted to say that the same comments that Andrew made about building trades apprenticeships also happily apply to hospitality apprenticeships, about self-funding and economic efficiency. And we also do include soft skills.
Great, thank you, Austin. And kudos to this group, right on time at 8:54, 10 minutes on the dot with the first category. Catherine, if you can move us in the slide to the next category. Vamos a comenzar los comentarios para la siguiente categoría. Y si gustan compartir algo en español, ya sea en el chat o si prender el micrófono, los invitamos que levanten la mano y lo reconocemos para que hagan sus comentarios. Okay.
1 second. I apologize. I don't know why it's not moving to the next slide. So 1 second.
Not a problem.
Can you just read it off while she moves it?
Sure.
Forward?
Absolutely. So let's move into the next category. In that category, I'm pulling up my spreadsheet. Estrategias for diversifying the economy. So these are the strategies found under the second column, B, for enhancing the diversification of Orange County's economy. Comentarios, preguntas sobre la categoría de la diversificación de la economía del condado de Orange. Los invitamos que hagan comentarios. Austin, was that a holdover from the last category? Do you have a comment on this one as well? Go ahead and come off mute if you want to add something for this category, Austin.
Hold over. Sorry about that. Hold over.
Okay, no worries. Preguntas, comments, questions related to the strategies? Cesar, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I just want to appreciate and reiterate the importance of having these overarching themes of making sure that economic development moves along with making workers more stable, right? And that includes environmental issues, housing issues. So I'm really excited to see that diversification of strategies as we move forward with this plan.
Thank you, Cesar. And I think we have Luis in the queue after you. So go ahead, Luis.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment. I have some notes that a few of us got together last week to kind of go over the strategies, and I just took some notes on some comments from different folks. One thing I heard from our compañera Patricia from OCEJ. I don't know if she's on the call today, but there was a specific suggestion around some language to put some emphasis in terms of those apprenticeships and training programs. Just some language. She suggested something that said, like I put it in the chat and I just lost it now, but it said, especially in environmental and climate related jobs. And then also this next comment is I think applicable to both the first two columns, well, several columns. Actually, I think all of the first 5 columns mention, small business strategies. And one thing we were talking about with compañero from Cielo, Josefa, who I believe might be out of town today, but he was mentioning that with small business strategies, it's going to be important to make sure that we are reaching small businesses that are owned by disinvested community members. And I think that applies in several columns. There are existing economic development strategies and resources, but it would be great to include some language to make sure that that resources are reaching those disinvested community members in a better way. Because I feel like a big part of the issue in the past has been that even when resources do exist, they don't necessarily reach the communities that need them the most. So all that to say, I think Thrive is in favor of adding a little bit more specific language on a few of the strategies. And
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Luis. I see Nate, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. And just to kind of build a little bit more off of Luis's comments, with Cooperación in particular, when we're doing development of cooperative businesses, one point that I noticed in this particular column for strategies for increasing economic diversification is that already kind of exists for a lot of low-income individuals and residents of Santa Ana who already have to find multiple side hustles just to make ends meet. And a lot of those same self-enterprising individuals already kind of practice carbon neutral matters of conducting their businesses because they can't really afford higher costs, less climate friendly practices. And one big example of that is in a recent community forum that we had back in October. People mentioned, having to carpool together to and from. If they're in the landscaping business, they carpool to and from the landscape location that they'll be landscaping or a construction site that they'll be working on. And even, for example, wives of multiple families will provide shared childcare if there's any kids who may not be going to school during the day for younger children. And then even as they get older, making sure that there's somebody at home at the end of the school day. And so with those things in mind, cells B3 and cells B6, as well as B13 in this particular column are of particular importance for a lot of Santa Ana residents.
Thank you, Nate, for offering that to the group. Other comments or questions, please raise your hand. We've got a couple more minutes allotted for this category, so if you'd like to comment, please raise your hand and we'll give you some time. ¿Comentarios, preguntas sobre esta categoría? Otherwise, we'll give the additional 3 minutes to the next category. Any comments, questions? Last call here.
Ish, I would just say as we move through this, to kind of Luis's suggestion. So I think if we have time, we have to kind of address like, do we want to start including some of this language before the vote, or see what kind of rises to the top amongst those 21, and then have a discussion about including specific language when we kind of massage and refine it. So just Luis, if we have time, let's have that conversation at the end. I don't want to give any other categories short shrift here. So Luis, like, hopefully we can address that in a little bit, just FYI, but let's try to move through this. And if we can get the group's opinion on, do we try to make some of these alterations now versus see what the top 21 are and then start making them then.
Right, thank you, Jesse. Certainly will remind us if we have some time left over after the review. Let's move into the next category. And this is the category related to strategies for responding effectively to economic shocks. Vamos a invitar comentarios sobre esta categoría de estrategias para responder efectivamente a interrupciones económicas. Questions and comments, please raise your hand or come off mute. Levanten la mano virtual o prendan el micrófono si tienen comentarios que quieran ofrecer al grupo. Okay, any questions, comments? All right, not seeing any. We do have one. Linda, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry if no one's going to weigh in. I just wanted to weigh in similarly on this category, perhaps all of them, but on this category, particularly where there are sets of strategies and tactics that are laid out. And I think they could very effectively, several of them could very effectively be combined under one really compelling, set of strategies to be implemented. So I think there's opportunity here to, we're going to select a few, but I think there's opportunities here to consolidate as well.
Great, thank you, Linda. Other comments or questions for this category? Nate, I see Nate, you got your hand up, and then Tony. Go ahead, Nate.
I'll just make a real quick quip about the importance of language justice, especially in times of emergency or economic shocks. I think that's a really important factor for not just residents of Santa Ana, but many non-native English speaking folks in Orange County.
Thank you, Nate. Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to uplift the comment of the recommendation in there about the proactive looking at barriers to accessing services well ahead of the disasters. And Nate identifies one of them being language, but which is obviously very important. The other is really examining programs and services that we use during disasters and make sure that we don't have a requirement. Maybe it's a certain documentation requirement that could be addressed with a proxy, because during a disaster, those documents aren't there. So that's that kind of pre-look, as I said, barriers and other things, so that we're fully available to actually assist people in the times of disasters. And that's in one of the recommendations.
Thank you, Tony. And I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up emojis floating up the screen as you were talking. Desiree, welcome. Let's turn to you.
So I had a question about the AI strategy and what the thinking was behind that, because there's been a lot of discussion within the higher ed and teachers in terms of how AI is disrupting the learning process of individual students and not making them critical thinkers and stuff like that. And so I totally understand that we're going to be depending on AI and automation in a number of different industries, probably in the future. But how deep has anybody investigated the AI portion of the strategy, or where that came from?
It is, I would say, well, again, this was just, the process was, it was surfaced like a brainstorming idea and then it was voted out. So I mean, we have a section in the report around AI if it wants to give you, I think, from an expert, someone who consults with the UN actually on AI, if we want to think about its implications. But again, this was not as if there was a lot of time being spent refining all this. It was just organically coming from whichever stakeholder, they surfaced it, and then that stakeholder group liked what they heard and made that a priority.
Great. Thank you for the question, Desiree, and Jesse for the clarifying comments there. Andrew, let's turn to you.
I look in the cells here, and there's a lot of time spent on helping people, pay rent and, give payments to businesses. But I thought I don't know, my thought was we find an industry or a sector or something to invest in that could be resilient to economic shocks, that regardless of an economic meltdown or a pandemic, that the industry and the jobs that this industry creates could be resilient to those economic shocks, not that everything gets shut down and we start handing out payments for rent and food assistance, but can we create an industry or jobs that is resilient to those economic shocks so we don't have to do, extraordinary tactics to kind of get people back on their feet if they just stay on their feet. So just noticing that in the cells.
Thank you, Andrew. And Cesar, I have you next in the queue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that last point. I think it's also, aside from just creating resilient economies and jobs, we also have to be mindful that some of these jobs may not get to the levels of payment that are needed in Orange County to survive. So we are going to need those interventions and supports that go beyond just having those good jobs in theory to be ready to support a lot of these families who may not have stability. So I think the goal is to provide housing stability, economic stability in a variety of ways. So I think there's more discussion to be merit around that.
Thank you, Cesar, for your comments. Other questions or comments on this category of economic shocks the group would like to offer? ¿Otros comentarios o preguntas en esta categoría de interrupciones económicas?
Okay, Dr. Ward, can you answer Byron as a question in the chat? I think you would know how to answer that really easily.
Yeah, let me read it here. What is an example of a job that is immune to an economic shock?
Immune.
Immune. Okay, there was an extra letter in there.
Yeah, there's a whole section in the research about that the centers of excellence for the community colleges that talk about those that are immune, but probably the easiest one off the top of my head is healthcare. People don't stop getting sick during a recession, and as Orange County is getting increasingly older, people consume more healthcare. So healthcare would be probably the best example.
Great, thank you, Dr. Walro.
Can I add one real quick comment on this?
Go ahead, Luis.
Category. I just want to show some support for some of the comments I've heard so far in terms of, especially to be able to respond to economic shocks. Having businesses and services that are low barrier, and I'll also on, low tech, I think services, more in-person services, I think are important, having facilities that are accessible to folks without a whole lot of requirements is going to be important when we respond to those economic shocks. And I'm just going by, what we've seen with COVID and other economic shocks that we've experienced in the last few years.
Thank you, Luis, for those additions. Desiree, I see that you have your hand up. I'm not sure if that was a holdover from earlier or if you have another comment you want to offer.
It's a holdover, sorry.
No worries. Other comments or questions on this category? Otherwise, we'll move into the next one. Let's do that now. And so let's jump into category D, which is strategies for increasing economic equity. Vamos a comenzar con esta categoría de estrategias que ayudan a aumentar la equidad económica. Who'd like to kick us off? Go ahead, Nate. Thank you.
I just had a question about this because I see some particular cells that kind of almost mimic other categories. And so, for example, cell D4 makes mention of apprenticeships, which was also mentioned in the first category, column A. And I'm just curious to know if there's any sort of thinking in including similar items in multiple categories.
Yeah, I think this is where we want. I mean, so I'm not just going to show the top 3. I'm going to show the full results. And so I think that's part of a conversation. If you see that, they're picking up 15 votes in all these different categories, they may add up to a lot, and how those votes break down for that decision to be made. So I think we just want to have this vote. Let's see where things shake out a little bit. And I think we can then, nuance things rightfully, as you pointed out.
Great. Thank you for that question, Nate, and Jesse for the clarifying on process there. Other questions or comments from the group? ¿Preguntas o comentarios sobre esta categoría? Luis, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to write up my suggestions because I have some suggestions for language on this one. Starting with D3, that it says improving community outreach around around economic development. I'll go ahead and put my suggestion in the chat for that one right now. Basically for Thrive, in our experience with economic development, yes, we need more improved community engagement, but really shifting the language from that of just more engagement, like just more promotion of economic projects. We really want to set the bar at greater direct participation of residents in economic development projects. So the language change that we're suggesting for that particular strategy is along those lines. Oh, I put the wrong one. I'm so sorry. This is for this is for the the comments I just made is for D14. And
got it.
And the language that I put, I'm sorry, I'll organize the language a little bit better and put it in the chat. So disregard what
Luis,
I just put now.
Luis, if you want to put the cell number at the start of the comment, that'll help us.
Okay, yeah.
To the right one.
So I'll wrap up my comment. One was that the comment that I just made was actually with regard to D3, and then the language that I put in the chat is for D14, which is related to this ecosystem that exists of community development financial institutions, these agencies that are dedicated to economic development. That is great, but we want to improve access for disinvested communities to that network of resources. And then also we did just want to suggest that in that network of resources to go ahead and add the language of community land trusts as a potential resource in the county. Thrive is not the only community land trust in the county. We have the Irvine Community Land Trust, and Bolsa Chica has a land trust also focused on preserving land, native land. And anyway, we can add that also in the list of the regional network of community intermediaries.
Great, thank you, Luis. Let's turn to Rick. Yeah, I see your hand is up. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'm just scanning this under D, and you know, I think it's been perfectly clear. There's a lot of stuff in a lot of different categories, which could be, we could place a mix and match with this. I am just seeing kind of a miss on transportation. I know we're not hitting that hard in this, but when it comes to economic equity, there's few things that are a bigger barrier. So I kind of a miss not to have something that addresses that, at least on the individual level, if not on the sort of the level of like building an infrastructure.
Great, thank you, Rick, for those comments and offered to the group to consider. Anyone else would like to raise their hand or come off mute, share some comments or questions in this category? ¿Otras preguntas o comentarios? Okay, let's move on then to the next category, which are strategies for increasing health equity. Vamos a seguirle aquí con la siguiente categoría, estrategias para aumentar la equidad de salud pública. ¿Quién gusta comentar aquí o hacer preguntas para el grupo? Questions, comments? Rick, I'm going to assume that was a holdover from the last category, unless you want to come off and offer some thoughts here. Other questions, comments from the group?
Holdover, by the way. Sorry about that.
No worries. Increasing health equity. Go ahead, Tony.
I just want to uplift it. I represent the American Indian Chamber of Commerce of California, and we had 2 recommendations in relative to the health needs and access to resources for American Indian and Alaska Natives in the Orange County and Los Angeles corridor, and just hope people will consider that. The whole issue is culturally appropriate, culturally sensitive, and then what programs are currently available, but not perhaps available at the levels that we need in order to meet the populations that we want to serve. So I just want to uplift that maybe it's very important to us relative to healthcare.
Thank you, Tony, for sharing that. Cesar, let's go to you.
Thank you. I just also wanted to uplift another strategy that is not clearly shown here. I think a lot of our disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, are impacted by social determinants of health in their community. So making sure that we have more resilient neighborhoods, and we're addressing those at the neighborhood level. I think health really starts where people live and where they operate. So we need to be conscious about how we direct investment to improve quality of life in those neighborhoods.
Thank you, Cesar, for sharing that. Other comments or questions from the group related to the increase of health equity? Nate, I see your hand is up. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, thank you. So I really appreciate Tony's insight, and one thing I want to add to that is many people have expressed interest in wanting to participate in employment in the health sector. But one of the biggest barriers that's faced is literally the language issue, that even the programs that train folks to work or gain employment in the health sector are still geared heavily towards English speaking, English communication. And so I think one aspect that needs to be considered in increasing health equity is language accessibility, not just for those who are providing it, but those who are trying to gain employment in the health sector as well.
Thank you, Nate, for those comments. And I want to invite others to add to that or offer new suggestions, other commentary, questions on this category. Go ahead, Linda.
Sorry. one of the things that I took note of was that there wasn't any mention of preventative activities, proactivity, focus on preventative medicine, focus on being conscious about preventing some of the things that we find ourselves engaged with, like diabetes and so forth. So I thought maybe we might want to add that.
Thanks, Linda, for that suggestion. Nate, I see your hand is back up. Go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to add one last bit, which was
Sure.
a lot of immigrants specifically who come from other countries with different experiences of what health means, in terms of increasing access for people who may have knowledge which may not be honored or revered the same way as a lot of the medical industrial complex here in the US or a lot of Western medicine has institutionalized. I think there might be some space in this category for increasing employment opportunities for quote unquote non-traditional methods of health to be more normalized. I think specifically about midwives who are delivering babies at home instead of at the hospital is one big thing that I think a lot of other people from other places outside of the US have more experience with, but then it gets devalued once they come to the US.
Thank you for that addition, Nate. Other comments or questions from the group? We still have a couple more minutes here to accommodate a few more.
Buenos días.
Sí,
Quiero hacer un
adelante.
comentario, y disculpen que me he guardado todos mis comentarios, pero quiero en esta parte que es importante, ahora sí sumando lo que ha dicho la compañera, en la prevención, creo que es donde desafortunadamente casi no se ha tomado en cuenta invertir en la prevención. Creo que es aquí donde se debe empezar a canalizar recursos para prevenir diversos problemas de salud, sobre todo que aquejan nuestra comunidad en general, porque creo que es aquí, perdón, yo digo, porque estoy participando con el proyecto de salud mental de parte del condado, pero la verdad no les ha interesado porque siempre resulta más, no sé cómo decirlo, conveniente
Ajá.
gastar en tratar de curar y realmente no dan paliativos nada más, pero no se logra realmente. Entonces creo que es importante empezar a canalizar recursos en la prevención de diversos problemas de salud que se dan. Y no sé, obviamente se tiene que hacer un buen plan en que sea efectivo pues sí, la prevención. Enfocarnos, yo digo, empezar pensando de una manera bien estructurada para lograr hacer un buen plan
Sí.
en la prevención de diversos problemas de salud, sobre todo.
Muy bien,
Gracias.
Gracias, Apolonio. Just to briefly summarize, Mr. Cortez just wanted to offer his support to Linda DeMario's comments around prevention, really stressing the importance to begin to funnel more resources to preventative activities around public health. He cited as an example mental health as a very reactionary space where a lot of the resources are focused on treatment, but very little is focused on preventative care within that space of public health. But overall, this space of public health being very deficient of preventative resources to try to resolve some of the public health issues that residents in Orange County deal with. So he's just want to add his support to those comments. Gracias, Apolonio. Cesar, did you have a comment? I see you came off mute.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Gotcha. Anyone else want to offer a comment? Otro comentario que gustan ofrecer Sokolin, yes, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning everyone. Oh, myខ្ញុំឈ្មោះ Sokolin ហើយខ្ញុំចង់លើកយកមកនិយាយ ថាដូចអ្នកនិយាយពីមុនមករឿងដាក់បញ្ចូលភាសា
Good morning, everyone. Her name is Soklin, and just like a speaker have already mentioned about the language justice, and just Soklin, she's the one who not be able to speak in English, and her English is limited, so she just want to make sure that English language is accessible in order to get any kind of service, especially for the health equity.
Very good. Thank you very much, Sokolin, for sharing those comments for the group here today.
ខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យមានភាសាដាក់បញ្ចូលដូចជានៅតាមទីពេទ្យនិងមានលើកជាអក្សរខ្មែរដាក់មក
She would like to address that, for example, if possible, in the clinic or any kind of like public institution, is if other language is accessible would be good. And for example, she is a Cambodian speaking, so Khmer language is very important for her.
អរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, Sokolin, very much. Very good. Other comments or questions from the group? ¿Otras preguntas o comentarios? Okay, I'm not seeing. Oh, we got one more. Janice, welcome.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Sorry, I'm kind of under the weather. I just want to let everyone know that has spoke up about healthcare that I appreciate it. I am in the behavioral health portion. I really do want to emphasize that if you don't have good health, then you're not going to be able to work. The economic portion is very important, I understand, but healthcare should be number one. As most employers, I'm speaking of myself, are not able to access good healthcare or healthcare period, and it's very expensive. I would like to make sure everyone does take a look at it, this section, and give your opinion. I would like to also see if there is a group that can be created, within this week's time to just discuss the items that are in there and see what really does resonate with us, get each other's opinions. It doesn't have to be a long discussion, but this is number one on my priority list. And thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Janice. Appreciate you coming off mute. Other comments or questions from the group on this topic of increasing health equity? ¿Otros comentarios o preguntas sobre esta categoría de equidad de salud pública? Okay. Not seeing others, I will invite Catherine to advance us to the next slide, and we will focus the next few minutes on strategies for increasing environmental equity. Se les invita a que ofrezcan comentarios sobre esta categoría de la equidad de medioambiental, del medio ambiente. Questions, comments? Who'd like to get us started here? Melanie, go ahead.
Hi, thanks again. So I'm a little bit confused on F2 where it says use students from four-year community college and high school marketing programs to partner with their multimedia programs, pathways, and create campaigns and competitions. I don't know that that fits under this category, but I'm wondering if somebody has an explanation that I'm not aware of.
Nope, just that was surfaced in one stakeholder group and was still supported. I thought it was weird too, but again, I wasn't going to take the position of removing options. Doesn't be your thing. I would just think that it, people can defend it, but it just wouldn't be a high vote getter type of thing. But if someone else recalls specifically when this was brought up, but Melanie, just like all these things, that was just the process.
Yeah, well, I thought maybe I missed something. So
No.
yeah, but if somebody has an explanation on how that ties into environmental equity, I'd love to hear it.
Any comments or questions to?
Melanie, I will make an attempt to answer your question, but I don't know that I will do 100%. But when we talk about competitions, there's like the small houses building, there's the greenhouses, there's a lot of things that the students are participating in to gain awareness about the environment. And so by expanding pathways to reach all different types of students, even those from disinvested communities and things like that. I think the goal here was to spark an interest in getting into fields and having that environmental awareness. I think that's where this is coming from.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melanie, for the question, and Jill, thank you for that clarifying remark on the question. Other comments or questions? Sokolin, I see that you have your hand up. Or was that a holdover from the previous category? In any case, if you do want to comment here, feel free to unmute your mic and offer some comments or questions. All right, in the meantime, let's turn to Tony and then Nate, and then we'll go to Gary. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, one of the issues that we uplifted had to do with the green innovation zones, and I just wanted to highlight that there's a lot of programs that are out there that assist businesses in transitioning, whether it's your HVAC system, your operating processes, etc. But they have never been kind of at scale, thoughtfully put together, understanding that small businesses might need extra help and putting a whole package together. And so the concept is to choose areas that had large concentrations of small businesses and help them collectively move to kind of this greener pathway. If you have a large corporation, we see strategies that, you might do marketing, but a lot of times small businesses are not thought of at scale. And so they go, oh, it's too hard. So the focus is to say, let's help them get there. And there's a lot of strip malls. There's a lot of different ways you could cut this, but anyways, that's the idea of a green innovation zone to help that business with 0 to 1 to 5 employees.
Thank you, Tony, for surfacing those resources and giving us more detail on that strategy. Let's turn to Nate, and then we go to Gary after that.
Thank you. And one thing I noticed that's absent in this particular category, having lived and toured various different places around the world, is the idea of public transportation. A lot of the suggested strategies, I think, are effective. Yes, I think that they focus very heavily on the individual business or the individual neighborhood. And within all these different neighborhoods and businesses, which might be trying to make a better impact upon or a lesser impact upon the environment, you still have to drive between each of those regions or zones. And Tony kind of touched on the idea of marketing. I think one effective strategy that might tie in maybe with the idea that was presented in F2 regarding utilizing students is marketing the idea of what should we be worried about in climate change. I think a lot of the time here in Southern California, and specifically Orange County, the conversation gets lost. It's like, well, we have recycling. Well, what if we just didn't use plastic bottles to begin with? And so I think a lot of education is still needed for this particular category to be effective in the aim of SURF and making sure that people have access to good paying jobs, economic viability. And I think marketing and education is one aspect that could be added into any one of these individual suggested strategies.
Thank you, Nate, for those comments. Let's turn to Gary next, and then we'll go to Andrew after that.
Thank you. I have a question more on procedure, maybe of Jesse and Ismail. How much latitude do we have going forward if we adopt 3 of these strategies at each group? How much latitude do we have to modify or add something that's not there? Great suggestion was preventative health. That absolutely should be on there, and it's not. And so, what is the latitude? How would we add something at this point in time? And Nate's suggestion about transportation, and then you get into electric transportation, and then you get into the need for electricians, and things like that are wonderful subjects and important. But if we don't see them in these, how do we refine this and add to things that possibly aren't there now?
Yeah. So Andrew, can we have your comment? Because I mean, that is about process, and then I will, if there's time, Gary, I'll definitely answer that question. But Andrew, take your comment first.
Sure. I was going to piggyback off of Tony's comments about the green innovation zones. And there's a lot of money that already exists in both state and federal government, especially the federal government the last couple of years. And I think trying to hone our discussion in ways where money already exists instead of trying to find new pots of money. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, all created huge tax incentives and tax breaks for not just large corporations, but for small business to take advantage of for things like energy efficiency upgrades, HVAC systems, insulation systems that go on top of buildings, which buildings are the #1 contributor of greenhouse gases, not necessarily cars and vehicles. So, I'm going to uplift that comment, uplift that cell, because on top of that, the industries that support that green innovation zone create the high quality jobs, create high quality health insurance for people who work in those careers. It covers a lot of the multiple areas that we're talking about here. So I want to uplift that cell, uplift Tony's comments, and really think this is an area we should be driving into. It also helps at the transportation sector with either electricity or hydrogen fuel cells. I mean, it really crosses many sectors that people here are talking about. So.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Justin, did you want to touch briefly on Gary's?
Yeah. So, I mean, the short answer is, I guess, technically a lot. This is yours to submit to the state. The challenge, or something I caution, is that you kind of start undermining the process that was agreed to if you just say, so, I mean, yes, we went through the stakeholder groups, and you guys, or those groups made their decisions. We don't like what you decided, so we're going to include our own. And I know there's a balance there, so that's again for the group to decide. That's really the answer I would say. I think if the intent was, again, to decentralize some decision making broader than this group, while also ensuring that this group had final authority, that's the process we set out. Otherwise, we could have just had this group use meetings to structure the strategies we kind of wanted and refine further. So that's the answer. I mean, technically, this is your group to submit, so you will submit whatever this group agrees to. I just caution against the inclusion of, I think, modifying, slightly changing or consolidating is probably more in the spirit of the process we set out with this than a full-blown, we need a whole new strategy. So I would recommend looking in those terms. But Gary, that's really the best way to answer that question. And again, this is not OCBC submission. This is this collaborative submission, and so the collaborative will have to make that decision on whether they want to rewrite essentially strategies.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse. And
Ishmael, yeah, I'm just going to interject real quick to Jesse's point. I think, combination and expanding on issues, for example, on the health issue, preventative health, the 2 words do appear in one of those. I think it's a 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's like the 5th one it does appear. So that gives us, in my mind, the opportunity to expand on that and incorporate it in a larger way and a greater scope. So that's where I think that's where our opportunities are. Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. No, thank you for that addition, Linda. And thank you, Jesse, for the explanation. Andrew and Nate, were those holdover hands from earlier, or do you have an additional comment to add here?
I do have
Holdover, my apologies.
No worries.
Just to be clear, I wasn't necessarily suggesting that new strategies be added to this particular category. It was just a matter of, in looking at the small amount when you compare it to other categories, what was missing is this idea of transportation. So based off of that analysis that I had, I was just suggesting that maybe, well, at least one way I'm going to look at it when considering what to vote on in the poll is strategies which start at the basis of like those which start with like what is, so I think the green zones is a great initiative because it puts the idea in the small businesses' minds of how can I be better at being green. But then, you know, in line with that first cell of utilizing high school talents to even just start. I'm willing to bet a lot of younger folks know are a lot more well-versed in ideas about environmental justice than a lot of older folks, just because it's really burgeoned throughout the past 20, 30 years. And so now it's being taught in schools more. So that's just where I was forming my thoughts on how to proceed with which ones to select. Not necessarily suggesting that we add new things.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that, Nate. Appreciate it. Any other comments or questions before we move on to our 7th and final category? Preguntas, comentarios en esta categoría antes de seguir con la última categoría.
Can I make a quick suggestion?
Go ahead, Luis.
Just for that E6 cell that Linda just referred to, thanks for pointing that out. My suggestion would be where it says more outreach and awareness on preventative health, maybe more investment in preventative health strategies or something like that.
Thank you, Luis, for that suggestion. We'll make sure to capture it in the follow-up.
Thanks.
¿Otras preguntas o comentarios? All right, well, we're gonna move into our 7th and final category, which is strategies for alignment with the state strategies. Esta categoría última, 7ª y última es contiene las estrategias para alinear con las estrategias del Estado. Who wants to kick us off here? Los invitamos a que hagan comentarios. Any comments or questions here? And there is a comment or question in the chat I see from Nate on this one. Is there an easy web page or link that outlines or summarizes what the strategies for the state are?
Yeah, Nate. So only in the deck that's in the folder, the state elaborates a little bit further on each of these, of which, of course, this one is there. Other than that, and other than, you know, we tried, that's why if you can recall the December meeting, we brought the state on to try to highlight some of the things to this group. There isn't something directly from SURF or California Jobs First for us to review and to try to match. So if that does come out, you know, we can review it and then reassess what we come up with here. But given what was presented and those PowerPoint presentations in the December meeting and what's in that deck already, that's about it.
And Jesse, if I can add a couple of insight here, if you look at to try to give an answer to Nate's question on what some of the state's priorities and strategies may be, if you look at some of the areas of emphasis in the state budget and the tone that comes out of Sacramento with this administration, the state does signal that it cares about things not only, but certainly inclusive of issues related to climate change, issues related to the electrification of the state's energy resources, issues related to the development of industries that offer good paying, high quality jobs, issues related to inclusiveness of disinvested communities, communities that have been not historically involved in these sort of planning processes that we're engaging in here today. Those are just some suggestions. There's also a large infusion of federal and state resources related to the deployment of infrastructure projects to help make the state more resilient to climate change. And so those are just some thoughts from me based on observations that I've gathered from statewide efforts and convenings that I'm happy to offer today. Tony, let's turn to you, and then we'll go to Christy, who's here as a liaison to the state to offer some maybe clarifying remarks there. So Tony,
I would say, why don't we let Christy go first?
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Christy.
Thank you. So I definitely want to add to what Ish said. You know, definitely can echo what Ish had just mentioned, but at the same time, it's a lot more prioritized that you all think about what you think is best for your region versus trying to align with state initiatives. Definitely, aligning with state initiatives is really great, but at the end of the day, what California Jobs First really hopes is we're trying to give the power of economic development to you all as a community to collaborate and make sure that there is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to really support your disinvested communities. Of course, I am trying to reach out to each and one of you. It's taking some time because there's only one of me's, but I can definitely go into detail about this if you have any questions on the side as well. But what the state really hopes is you all think about what does Orange County really need in terms of economic development.
Very helpful. Thank you, Christy, and thank you for reissuing that invitation to everybody to please connect with Christy when she reaches out to you, and so you can have some time to discuss this process with her as well, and she can tell you more about what GoBiz and other state agencies do to support. Tony, let's turn now to you.
So as I looked at this particular one, what came to my mind was that, okay, so we come up with a strategy and it's going to have priorities and it's going to have clean ground tested data that that's available to the public. You don't have to necessarily be a coalition member in order to, or a collaborative member in order to access it, because it's all online. So it essentially would allow groups to move forward to do other public and private funding. So when I saw this particular strategy category, what struck me is to say, okay, based on what we've collectively said is really important, how can we further use this information and the capacity building that we've done to access state resources that implement our vision? So it might be a recommendation to the state on how they might display something, but everybody always wants everything in one place. I'm not saying it's not worthwhile doing that, because that's obviously where you want to go. But to me, this set is, how do we help organize ourselves in a way, maybe and so that's why you can see the different strategies, but that's what it looked like to me. And I don't know if that helps, but it's kind of like flipping it over. How do we take the plan to the funding piece in order to get the money?
Thank you, Tony, for those very insightful comments and questions to the group. And let's turn to the screen here to see if we can maybe take a couple more questions before we save the last 10 minutes for some wrap up. But any other questions or comments from the group on this category? Preguntas o comentarios en esta categoría antes de cambiar aquí a los últimos 10 minutos de la conversación de hoy. Okay, I think we're a minute ahead of schedule, Jesse, so let me turn it to you, I think, for this final section of the agenda for today. And I think you're still on mute, Jesse.
Yeah, sorry, Catherine, can you stop share so I can share my screen? So I'm just gonna, it's a simple Google form slide. I think to the point, up to the group, I'm happy to almost put what might be like, I'd put it in red, or find some way to identify the modified language for some of these, especially when they were explicitly mentioned. If you said cell B3, so that way, it's not being rewritten, but you can kind of see what the updated language could be if that's persuasive and maybe changing people's votes. Luis, I think if that's helpful, or to the whole group, given some of the suggestions, I could put that in so it's not as if we have to really work on the exact language and this has to be rewritten, but I can kind of add the modified language in some sort of, again, italics or red to some extent, so you can kind of see where that strategy could be headed. So I think I will do that. So we won't launch this yet. I'll try to just do this all today so we can still launch it by the end of today. So you guys would still have a week to vote. But simply, right, it's each category, as you see in your spreadsheet, and you're selecting the top three, right? So this was the first one, and just go all the way down. This is in English. We do have a Spanish link. I'm not showing that now, but we will also share the Spanish link. in the email immediately after this call. But just know that, you know, Ish and myself will then I'll have to do it. Ish does the translating into Spanish, so there's the right context. So we'll try to make those changes, and you'll just see that in here. And that way we're kind of accommodating some people's input here. And as I mentioned, to Gary's point and others, this is not final. This is not, that's the language we're going to proceed with the state, but it just helps give this whole group a clue of where all of you are at versus the things that you want to prioritize. So the questions of consolidation, let's see what the results are, and we can try to think about consolidating without it being a whole new strategy altogether. So try to keep it as simple as possible. Again, it mimics the spreadsheet category, pick 3 options, and we're going to add them all up. With that,
Great, thank you, Jesse.
Share. Are there any kind of questions?
Any questions or thoughts on what Jesse just covered, and before we entertain a motion or an action for opening the poll? Preguntas o comentarios sobre lo que acaba de repasar Jesse, tocante la encuesta que se les va a ofrecer. Estaba describiendo un poco de lo que va a modificar con los comentarios que recibió aquí hoy, y se les va a mandar la encuesta después de esta reunión para que tomen una semana para seleccionar sus 3 estrategias por categoría. Well, before we proceed with an action and a motion in a second, we want to give the residents, the HRTC residents, maybe the final word here, final say on questions before we move into action. Ustedes residentes, como miembros de la que representan representantes que sirven en esta mesa de gobernancia, que representan comunidades marginadas y otras comunidades en el condado, ¿gustan ofrecer la última palabra aquí? Una pregunta, comentario antes de proceder con el voto. All right, well, we will need to entertain a motion in a second in order to formally open the poll and the survey as described and amended by Jesse. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Gary Brown
I'll
makes
second it.
And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing my screen. Who made the second?
Linda.
Linda, there it is. All right. All those in favor, signal by giving a thumbs up emoji or saying aye.
Thumbs up, raised hand, or in the comment in the chat. We'll add them all up. But
Can we have a real quick just a clarification of the motion? Can I maybe say how I understood, and you can tell me if I understood correctly?
Sure. Go ahead, Luis.
Jesse, you said you're gonna make some updates to the poll before posting it, you know, with some of the proposed changes that we talked about today.
Correct.
And then you're gonna send it out, and then we'll be able to respond by next week.
Yes, a week. So that's why I'm not dropping in the chat now, because I will make those changes, and then it'll all be emailed in my general recap. I would like to get that done. You know, my end of day will probably be different than 5 p.m. though, in order to do this with some of the things I have. But you'll have essentially by the end of next week, you know, 11:59 by next week to cast that vote.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
And then one last question. Is the process like whatever the poll says goes, or do we bring it back and confirm it here or something like that?
Yeah, it'll be confirmed here. And I think it's been brought up, right, that I think there might be modifications to some of that language without it being a whole new strategy. So again, I won't even show you, I'll show you more than just the top 3. You'll see the full result. So you'll see if one gets 1 vote, you'll see that as well, just to get the landscape and to speak to, again, as people brought up, that there are some, you know, more or less duplicative type of strategies and what that could mean if they have, you know, a decent amount of votes. So I will show you the full results for every single one. And then we can rethink modifications to language to consolidate certain things if we'd like, however the group would like to take it before, you know, there is a vote to finalize this language and send it to the state.
Awesome.
Thank you, Luis and Jesse. And Tony, before I go to you, I did see a hand up from Desiree and Kate. Did you both have questions or comments, or was it answered already?
That was voting.
Oh, voting.
Okay.
Gotcha. Thank you, Kate. And Desiree, were you voting as well?
Yes.
Got it. And then Tony, you had a hand up for a question. You were voting? Okay. Good. Nate, did you have a hand up?
I thought I had lowered it. It should be lowered now. Thank you.
Great. Well, I saw a lot of hands and thumbs up for being in favor of the motion. Is there any opposition to the motion? Certainly abstentions are welcomed as well. The abstentions? Okay, the motion passes.
Bueno, también estoy de acuerdo.
Apolonio
Como
is casting his vote in support. Gracias, Apolonio. The motion carries unanimously, so we will work on getting that out to you as Jesse has described. Okay, folks, well, we covered a lot here today. We have 4 extra minutes. Actually, we are ahead of schedule, believe it or not. And before we remind you that our next meeting is scheduled for February 23rd, same time, same bat channel. We want to just maybe open it up for any last parting thoughts or questions from the group, since we do have 4 extra minutes. La siguiente reunión será el día 23 de febrero. Igual aquí como estamos haciendo hoy en este Zoom, a la misma hora. Vamos a estar compartiendo los resultados de la encuesta. We'll be sharing, among other things, the results of the poll on the 23rd. But any comments or questions, Jesse? Any parting thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for like kind of the environmental group for kind of explicitly, although I'm sure all of you feel this way, kind of just saying that, all of our kind of your sectors, need to underpin and support the other. And that, right, like this primarily is economic development, but recognize that all you have a space in that and in each of these categories. And so I think we can't lose fact that it's about, creating good paying jobs, but also in the process of making sure that people of environmental community feel like their voice is being heard and we're meeting kind of their goals as well. So we understand economic development and good paying jobs are the center of this, but the health aspects, the environmental aspects, some of these other things are critical and have to underpin those as well. So thank you for explicitly saying that as a stakeholder group. Again, I'm sure all of you kind of feel that way in your respective stakeholder groups, but I just want to say that it really means a lot that it's explicitly said and people understand that. So thank you so much. Well, than that, I'll be following up soon.
Yeah.
I'm here for questions or comments after, since you have a week to vote. If not, I will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, and I just want to offer a reminder for those of you who are interested in huddling with Janice. She did make that invitation out for folks that want to connect with her to discuss the strategies on public health. So certainly coordinate offline. And I know some of the stakeholder groups are coordinating their times as well to review and discuss. So encourage you all to do that within your sectors, but also across your sectors. Reach out across to your other peers in other sectors to have a discussion as time permits in this upcoming week. But unless there's any other questions,
I would just say, so one thing, I'll reshare everyone's contact information, but of course, if you want to use me as the facilitator of some of those conversations, you're more than welcome to do that. Or if you want to do something, more directly, I'll do both. And I'll reshare that in the recap, everyone's contact information to gather those folks. Other than that, we're good. Thank you, Ish.
Great. With that, I wish you all a great weekend, and you do have to biasly say go 49ers this weekend. Let's get that win. But have a good weekend. Take care, everybody.